All right, so now that we have a nice front-end form, we'll start creating the controller on the back end to actually handle the sign up. It's going to require a decent amount of setup. So I'm going to close out all the front end stuff for the moment. And in the very root directory of the project, the very root directory, watch where you're putting these folders. We'll create a new folder called controllers. And inside of controllers, we'll create a new file called authentication.
Oh, shit. Oh. No.
Oh.
Actually, let's do this a little bit differently. Let's do, inside of controllers, let's create a folder called auth. And then inside of auth, we'll create a new file that is index.js. And then inside of auth, we'll also create a new file called signup.js. And we'll do module exports, request, response. So this is the function that will ultimately get called when we make a sign up request to the server. So to start, we'll keep it fairly simple. We'll do we'll do try, and we'll do response.send success equals true, and a message of this is the sign up endpoint. And then we'll do catch, error, and then we'll console.log the error so we can see it. We'll say sign up error. And then response.status 500.send sign up failed. And so this is just a little bit of code so we could test and make sure we get all of our routing and make sure we're calling the right place ultimately.
Is there anything in the index.js yet?
No.
Okay.
whenever I'm making a new controller, I always kind of template it like this, just to make sure, like I said, make sure it's working, make sure I'm calling the right thing, make sure all the routing is set up properly before I actually start building it out. Just like I'm sure you guys have heard a million times from me, like building React, where we start a component just very simple, just so we can see it on the screen. It's kind of the same concept, but for backend. All right, everybody good here?
Yeah.
All right, then in the auth index, we'll use this to kind of bring all the files in this folder together. So we'll just say module dot exports equals an object. And we'll say sign up, set to require this directory sign up. And then as we add more files to this folder, we could add it in. And once this gets built up a little bit more, we'll see the benefit of doing it this way. All good?
Yeah.
All right, then down in the routes folder, we'll make a new folder, also called auth. And that will have an index file in it. And then here we'll do const router equals require express dot router. I'll say const curly brackets equals require back directory, controllers, auth. And then we should go whole sign up. And then we could say router dot post / sign up. And then we'll do our sign up controller. And then finally module dot exports equals router. All right, good.
Yeah,
Did I hear hold on or?
hold on.
Yes, on. Please.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And then from here, we'll go into the index file that's directly inside of routes. And then we'll add another app.use /auth, and then require our auth.
Index inside the row. Whoa.
Plug this thing, and you might find something. No, it worked. So we're in the index.js for routes, right?
Yep.
It should be the underscore too.
Yeah, which one are you in right now?
Yeah, the index.
The index that's directly inside of the routes folder.
That looks like it's an auth, no?
No, it's not.
That's just really confusing. Okay.
Auth has an index, but see the little arrow pointing straight? Now it's pointing down.
Yeah, that's everything.
That is everything, quite literally. So what this does is whenever our server receives a request that starts with /auth, it's going to load this file, which is here. And then if it's /auth /signup, it will call our signup controller.
And it's got the index.js. That used to be called routes.js.
I did not call it routes.js. No, I didn't rename anything.
Yeah, that was me, bro.
Okay. I quote my bad.
Everyone good? So let's,
No, give me a second. Sorry.
okay. While we're waiting for everyone to catch up, double check that your server hasn't crashed. So it should still be running. If you have a bunch of errors, then that means your server crashed.
One more second. Okay.
Could you again what the index.js and routes is doing? Like the router is at post.
It's saying when we get a post request at /auth /signup, call this function.
Okay.
You all good?
Yeah, mine says app crash, waiting for file changes before starting.
Mine did that and then it compiled after. For some reason, yeah.
Well, if you change the name of that file, then the work's being required in.
Did I change the name of it? I did. Yeah.
Server required. Yeah. What? You don't need the file name anymore. And
It's going to be hanging. Maybe more awkward. Why? Okay.
Okay, another question, so real quick. What do you do? Because I noticed yours is different.
It's more fun.
same reason.
Boring.
Same thing.
Because you gave the file a name instead of just being index.
That's really cute.
But that's, we call them index, so you don't have to specify the file name.
Gotcha.
So That's the main reason you call stuff index there. If you're saying this is like the entry point.
Or stop them?
For sure. It just can get confusing when you're like looking a whole bunch. I'm sure you're used to it.
Yeah, no, in the beginning, it's definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say you do
Like,
that.
it's the skinny one is good.
No.
What's I'm trying to say, bro?
So when I ran it, it had that error at first, but then it did, like, I didn't do anything else in compliance.
You're welcome.
That's a run at 2000.
That's,
That's the front end.
Remember the one you're looking at? That one, it's
There's
Something wrong
a
with
bunch of
it.
other, one actually almost exactly like what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
But
Identify
apparently they're saying
modules
that
for
Rust
off.
changed, so that's gonna be different.
But
But you can actually,
So the client's
if you
fine.
look on my
No, I'm saying-
repository on GitHub, you
Yeah,
can
that's
pull
why I
out
said
starter
cloud
files
system
from there
first
too.
started. So you're not fucking with any of that. So go back to error so we can see where it's actually at. So. Identify module colors off from
Which one?
routes off.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we changed it
Wrong?
right here.
Index.
Did you choose
There's
the
the colors, though.
No, dude, I'm gonna stick
Looks like it's. I like it. Client holder. So keep all that closed, man.
Yeah,
That's why I said that.
so I'm telling you that.
There you go.
Everything.
That's good. Okay, we good? All right, so now that we have that set up, we can do a little bit on the front end to test it. But before we can do that, we need to, since we have a new kind of root route, the /auth, we need to set our front end up to take any requests and proxy them to the backend server, just like we did with /API. So in the client folder, find the package.json. Make sure you are in the right package.json. Oh, we already did it. Cool. I was smart when we set it up. So we already proxied for auth, so we're good to go. So we don't need to do anything. There. Woo. Yeah. Woo. Win for us. So what we do need to do now, though, is we need to set up a action creator that calls our endpoint. So in actions, first we'll define a type. So we'll go to action types, which is right now just export defaulting an empty object. And we'll do sign up equal to the string of sign up. And then we'll jump back to our actions index. And we'll do export const sign up equals user info arrow function that immediately returns another function that is async and that will get dispatch passed to it. And then in that function, we'll do our work. And we'll say try to do something, which will be const response equals await Axios dot. So we just defined this route, and when we defined it, we said it's going to be post. So because that's what we defined it as, that's what we do with our Axios, Axios.post. And then we routed it to /auth / sign dash up. So whatever this is what we have to call from the front end. So sign dash up. And then we want to send our user info. And then we want console.log sign up response. And then catch error. We don't really have any error handling in place, so for now we'll just console log it. We'll just say console.log sign up error dot message. And that'll be enough that we can test it. All we have to do is actually call it now, but that'll get us going in the right direction.
Just wait for some slow.
Did you just say error column message or error dot message?
Oh yeah.
I can't. Okay.
What are your types.js stuff?
It's just an object, man. With sign up, the property sign up equal to the string sign up. Here, I guess that was mean. You can see it.
I was fine. I was doing it.
It's just an object, man. Just an object.
Sometimes it's not that simple, Scott.
Stupid questions,
There are stupid questions, damn it.
I find a way.
All right, we all good here? You ready to test this bad boy? All right, so to test it, we need to go to our sign up component. So components, account, sign up JS. And we need to import curly brackets, sign up from bracket directory, actions. And then down at the bottom in connect, we need to pass our empty object, our sign up action creator. And then finally in handle sign up, we could say this dot props dot sign up, call that, pass it our form values.
I have something. Model build failed. Index.js syntax error.
All right, so we should be able to submit the form and see what happens. As long as everything's compiling. Looks like
Stop somewhere, so I probably someone to look.
where's the, if it's a module build failed error, it should tell you exactly where the error is at.
Okay, leave index.js syntax error MHTC user subscript client action types.js action types. Why?
So if it works, you should get your sign up response, and you should see in your data that little object that we sent back from that controller where it says this is the sign up endpoint, success true. So that's what you should end up with if it works.
Can you open the action then? Yeah, types are the same.
So when you get a module build error like this, go to your terminal. Okay, so right there's your error. In
I
types.
should be here like this.
There you
I was thinking, what's the error in here? It's like
go.
ridiculous. There's nothing.
Anybody else need help?
Authorization.
Yeah, I lost the next section.
Huh?
I lost the next section.
You lost the internet connection.
Yeah.
It should still work without internet connection.
I'm not doing this.
Ah, okay. I was gonna say it shouldn't matter.
No, I was doing something else, but. So, what are we supposed to check now? Just signing up?
Yeah, sign up and you should get the response back from the server.
I know, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, ooh. Jake, Taylor. Jake,
You should have what?
After you fill out the form and then submit it, you should get a response.
Sign up response. No.
Yeah.
Did you submit the form?
Yep. I just have signed up, but repeat something.
Now you
I don't have that second.
First name, last name,
I don't have a second.
and look at the password.
Okay, so go to once your terminal.
There
See if the server crashed.
That's
Server was crashed last time, but after that, it's not.
Scroll up. Scroll up. Okay, scroll down.
Quite appropriate.
Nope, too far.
Oh,
Stupid as well.
So it looks like the backend server's running and it didn't crash.
yeah, I know. I'm just
It's not
making sure that I'm not on the clock or grabbing lunch. Not necessarily too bad of a thing, but and then you make it to work.
You're never getting a response from you.
Yeah, I just kind of shut everything down. Oh, hey, Jake, I'm going to lunch.
I'm real busy.
Response stops.
So the other thing we did was the action in types. It's the
Why are you doing this?
thing.
There we go.
Maybe I have to start a server,
Beautiful, beautiful.
but maybe.
They're taking the space out of their
Oh.
message thing. It's ERR dot message. Oh. I don't know if it's probably.
But you did second time, right?
Unless.
Is your server saying anything now when you try to submit? It didn't crash, right? Entire road.
There's enough on there.
Yeah, it was still going.
We already did that. Where is it?
The way that they track my time, I just lost connection with the internet, but it was still going.
Controllers off.
Oh, no. Oh, well, I just lost everything I was working on that page on.
Oh, no.
It's alright. I'll just have to redo it, just now, throw it.
Or just do,
Yeah, probably.
you're like too fast anyway, so
A lot of times.
slow you down.
Yeah, a lot of times. Alright.
It's just a.
Really your share.
Oh, shit.
Response.
Try.
I think it's
Ooh, 7.5 mansion.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that person fucking that.
And the one that's inside the center.
We got them on lunch.
Yeah, we're gonna be heading out here shortly.
wanna go.
What are you guys doing?
Get his best.
And,
Yeah, here's the new rig I was talking about. Nice. I love it. I think the biggest thing was just having to worry about it like shutting down and working. So kind of like what happened here with the internet, that would happen just with it shooting out with that graphics card problem. So now I gave it to my wife and now she loves it. It doesn't have any problems anymore.
You're one of those kind of bookmark guys or tabs kind of guy.
Yeah, but not as like.
Okay.
Yeah, they just found out that he has like hundreds of tabs open.
I have like sort of an organization with it. This is all my like.
You already like in
tabs.
here.
Like this is my
Section.
tabs.
Not in
And I
here.
like
This
all
page
of
has
them.
some.
Fair amount. I really like it today. I'm like, oh, okay, I've had this open for 2 days and I haven't looked at it. I have it bookmarked. Close.
Yeah,
You're right.
I just bookmarked at this point.
Oh,
But
yeah, that's fine. Not fast enough, dude. 2013 to 2015.
I thought my computer was fast. Frederico's is definitely fast. About 480 tabs open.
Got a MacBook Air and got all 8 gigs of his RAM tied up.
It hasn't any.
I only use this thing for development, I do something else.
Laziness, never getting.
that's because you can't do anything else.
The button.
I saw you trying to send an
Do you
email.
actually go
on
back
that
to any of like the 300 of the other tabs? Do you ever go back, or is it just like?
Oh, that would be the best if it was just fire and forget.
I would love to see the stats.
Yeah,
What
for sure.
percentage of.
So what's the oldest
I
tab?
have
Like how
programs
LAN
that
server
call-
running
called
somewhere?
the quick suspender, where it literally.
Shouldn't matter, I mean, unless you have something else running on Fort 9000.
So like go back to that tab, it should be up in.
Yeah, but we'll do the point
Like
like
making it here.
I go back to
Dude,
it.
Memory, jeez.
Yeah. But do every 2 weeks I'll get done with it, and it goes back up.
That's so weird.
It'll go down to 15?
To like 50.
50.
Yeah. 3 weeks ago, it down to 50.
Ben's doing his part trying to back up the internet 1 page at a time.
Just in case the internet
No,
goes
that's
out.
all.
I won't be fucking, I'll be laughing at all of you. I'll read my articles.
Scott, are you guys gonna be breaking for lunch here in a little bit?
1:30.
1:30?
Yeah.
That's a little bit long.
If you guys.
Sorry, Fed.
I'll let you know how it is, bro.
Nice.
Send me a picture.
Send me pictures.
Yeah, so we're right there. So where is it making it to?
This is a guy I used to know. He
Clear
went
on.
to law school, or he went to ASU for law.
App.use for such file. Fire.
He couldn't get UCLA extension in May.
Okay.
And then I was like,
Shit.
I looked at his GitHub, and he just says GitHub. He started the bootcamp in May, and then now he's looking for a job now.
That's not a good look. How many did he? Yeah. Whatever.
And then I'm looking at his portfolio website, right?
Is this your boy?
No.
Just the guy that you're shooting at because you don't pass it.
That's what they
Yes,
your
cool.
sign.
Go on.
That sounds like a
Just so we're clear.
Oh, it's
Cool, cool.
There.
Oh, try taking type equals button off
This-
there.
Oh, cool.
Cause that might take out the submit function.
I just feel like there's a couple of things wrong. One, besides just visually and effective, it's probably like programmatically like not complicated. Why would you ever do this? You're about to like subscribe to like a whole bunch of things that like your employer
Right.
can just not be.
Very
with.
polarizing, yeah.
But just like you're about to like draw like a hard line. And maybe you're gonna find somebody who's like, fuck yeah.
Or maybe that's how he gets a job, honestly.
Maybe. Wait, next.
I'm trying to figure out
Yeah,
which
maybe another one of
is not-
these.
Well, this guy is very politically active.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's just a, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying like, you're
Yay.
Very strong stance.
Did
you
it.
can just like, yeah, you can just cause a lot of like rift before you even get in. Yeah.
Yeah. Glad we got it fixed by themselves. You didn't have to ask Scott for them.
And then click on super.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just pulling kids.
I was wondering that too, because I originally had it button on there, and then he said that, I was like, oh, I just took it off, and then I was thinking about that.
That's pretty
and
genius.
your son wasn't submitting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did it.
Does he have a description about
So
like?
it's not. This.
I feel like at least reading some Reddit something.
Oh,
Having to wait another hour.
Putting stuff that.
Is it? Are you sure that he's actually like
Huh?
actively looking or is this just like?
what?
Oh, no,
Yeah,
like, even on.
We'll go to 10,000?
Yeah, you want 9,000.
Yeah.
But at least I remember.
Maybe a hack or hardware for a start out.
I'm looking for it.
No, I mean, clear all those, all the.
You're on that now, then now I'm creeping.
Yeah, there's something blocking the request to go to this 9,000.
Why do you have them in your network if you don't talk to them? It sounds like you know.
Oh, I'm not.
So 9,000 somewhere, something is on 9,000 somewhere.
I knew him from
Something.
that one.
Something's going on.
So can we change it
Yeah.
to some different code?
Yeah, I mean,
But it was on 9,000. Password on
So, yeah.
9,000. Or API was on 9,000.
Yeah, the API is not working.
I really like overdose now, and I don't have that thing where I come in
But
from
it says
outside,
its server is
and I
running
turn
on
on
9,000.
the cold water, and the cold water feels like it's burning hot, because my fingers
There's
are
some
so
portfolio coming along.
That's not
Not mine. Oh god. Oh god. Oh
Oh
god.
my god. Burgers?
No, this is someone. This is a guy who went to
Oh,
UCLA
yeah,
Extension.
because the kids didn't.
He started. He went to
Yeah.
in May, and this is his
Oh,
gift.
thank
What?
God I grew up when I
That's
did.
pretty pathetic.
It's pretty sad.
Yeah.
And he's looking for a job now, and this is his portfolio.
Open it again. Why it's running? I don't have it now.
Yep.
And then, but the stuff on here is just.
And you still.
Didn't we do that in a root class?
Honestly, like, holy shit, dude.
I thought it was a joke.
You fucked up, dude.
So that moment when I suspend last time
Yeah.
some job, it's actually hold the space for 9,000.
Holy shit.
Yeah, did you hit like Control Z?
Uh-huh.
See?
Uh-huh.
Don't ever use
Oh, yeah?
Control Z. Because it just pushes it to the background. It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
stop it.
Oh, it says stop it. You should bring it back to foreground and stop it for real.
Yeah, I won't even use that.
Yeah, just, it was not on purpose.
Oh, tech, okay.
Yeah, they literally just got the key in it. And
So
so
we should be able to
okay.
do-
Okay.
That's fine.
they had.
That's like a professional.
Oh, that was my meeting.
We need
question.
to check
Oh,
that.
that's good, okay.
That was like 6-7 years
Let's
ago.
just-
Whatever.
We just go back.
let's just do this.
Massachusetts,
Simple.
so.
And
I
you
choose
can
it
somewhere
like
from
Very
the
well.
Lord.
where they-
You're not gonna
Nice.
what's
So I
that?
think it would have
And
like.
it's like,
You
oh, you're
comment
almost
something
Nope.
on models.
I don't know where she lived. Like I'm sure they had inside parts.
Yeah, context with this one.
All these, like,
Yeah.
brands I've never even heard of.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to.
Yeah, that.
I will question you if you do.
Why, what is it?
It's a different like fashion company.
Black Halo. Well, like, don't name it as logo. Motive and then extra.
Because we had.
Never. That was my company.
Have you always been
And
in
you
the
comment
apparel?
something somewhere else.
Yeah.
You make
What do you make it, like, what is it,
The
is it
multi
company where you designing your own apparel? or-
No, the online company, I was buying and selling it online.
Gotcha, okay.
But
Where you buy it
other-
from?
Yeah.
Oh, word.
I think I remember doing it, but.
Yeah, and no.
See, this is like a legitimate
No.
portfolio. What the
No.
fuck did I just
No.
look at?
I know, it was.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
He doesn't even say
Well,
like what
eventually
he's
we got
good
it.
at. And this is on his LinkedIn.
You know what that means? We have to.
All right, anybody else not get the response from the server?
Sorry.
Everyone's good?
See ya.
All right, so if you tested your form more than once, I'm sure you can see the tedium of testing forms because you have to keep typing into it. And we're going to be doing a lot where we have to keep submitting this form because we're going to test it as we go.
Yeah.
So there's a little workaround we could do to make it a little bit easier on ourselves.
We can just like pre-fill out the.
Yeah, well, we're going to pre-populate the form. And the way we do that with Redux Form is if we go to our form and sign up. So if I go to your form, our sign up form. And then we go down to the bottom. And in our Redux Form config object, we're going to add initial values. I'm going to set that to an object. And then we're going to say first name is equal to some first name. Last name is equal to some last name. Oops. And then email is equal to an email. Password is equal, and it still has to meet the form requirements because the form still will validate the information when you submit it. So it still has to, the password still has to have lowercase, capital, numbers, and a special character. Confirm password. Boop. And they still need to match and everything. So the form still has to be valid. But this way, when the page loads, it'll already be populated.
And is the initial values part of the Redux form?
Yep. So now when your form loads, it should already have everything in it. So we should be able to just say sign up and it should test it. Make sure you don't get like any errors when you.
Sweet.
I like our very uppity form.
You go back to the corner. We just need to. Okay.
Oh, why confirm password is not there? Because you put something wrong. Oh, it's there.
Oh boy.
Oh my god, you're so slow.
All right. So now that we're successfully hitting our endpoint, we could go back to that. I'm going to kind of close out some of the front end stuff to clean all this up. Close out some of the route stuff. We're done there. So I'm going to go to our sign up that was inside of controllers, inside of auth, the sign up JS. Should look like this. So when we make our API request, this is the function that's getting called. First thing we need to do is we need to find our data that we're sending. We're sending all the form values forward, so we need to find them. Yes.
Sorry, which sign up is that? Oh, it's the
Yeah.
server one?
The server one, yeah.
Okay.
Controllers, auth, sign up.
All right.
So whenever you're doing a post request, all the data will come to you in the body from the request object. And we can verify that we are indeed getting all of our data. We do console.log. Should be user data body. And now to test this, to see this console log, we have to go to our form, submit it. You don't have to refresh the front end. Okay. If you make changes on the server, you do not have to refresh the front end. All you gotta do is resubmit or remake the request somehow. So the request was remade, then we could go to our terminal and we could see user data, and we see that we do indeed on our server now have all the data from that form.
Back to the codes.
I don't see that.
Did you resubmit the form?
Oh, no. Okay, I see it now.
Yeah, so we got to submit the form to actually have this happen.
I have body undefined. I did something wrong.
Huh?
Actually, I did something wrong.
All right. So everyone all good? Everyone got the console log?
Where are we supposed to see it?
In the terminal.
In your terminal.
Or the back end of the code console log show up. All right. So now that we know for sure we're getting our data, we could actually take this destructure a step further and just pull off all the stuff we need. So I'm going to say colon that we need the first name. Oops. Last name. email, and password. We don't really care about the confirmed password on the server. Doesn't really matter. If you want to be a real stickler, we could double check to see that it matches here. But there's really no point because people could manipulate that, which is why that it's not really worth even checking on the back end. So we're just going to, if someone fucked with the confirmed password being different than the regular password, that means they intentionally did something to cause that. So if their account gets created with a bad password, that's their fault. You know, it was someone doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. All right, but all validation, most importantly, is done on the server. So we want to validate everything. So we're going to pull in our little validation object helper thingy. And we'll say const validation equals require, and then back a directory, helpers, validation.
Why do you do it as a const and do require? What is that exactly doing?
It's pulling whatever this file exports and then saving it into validation.
Okay. And that's different from import how?
It's not. It functions a little differently, but the concept's the same. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same principle. You're pulling stuff from other places.
Yeah.
Node doesn't have import and export, though. You have to use require in Node.
Okay. So this is the way of doing it on the back end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cheers.
All right, so then we want to do, let's set up a errors object. So we'll say const errors equals an array. And then we'll do if not first name, errors dot push no, or let's do not no, missing first name, else if not validation dot, I thought there was a name one, just username.
For Redux form or?
Name. There's a name one.
Yeah, name register.
Yeah. Well, and there's a name function. It just didn't show up. So validation dot name. Oh, there it is. Should have just typed it.
Is the errors an array?
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't just tell.
So else if not validation dot name, and we'll pass in first name. Then errors dot push first name can only contain no special I don't know, whatever you want to put for their message. I start overthinking it and making it worse. And it really doesn't matter that terribly much.
Who actually sees this there? Only us, right? Or only
No.
people?
No, we could. So we're gonna send this back to the front end, and potentially users can see these errors if we wanted to.
And so what would be the difference between when they're first doing the form and then these errors?
These errors are the server rejected what you sent. The only way someone should ever see these errors is if someone was fucking with stuff they shouldn't have been fucking with.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if for some reason the validation just didn't work 100% like we thought it did on the front end, and somehow someone might have accidentally got around the validation on the front end.
Yeah.
Then they would see these errors.
So this is like a double check, like.
Yeah. Well, the server's always the final say so.
Okay.
Any validation on the front end is just nice user feedback.
Cool.
So they don't fill out the whole form, submit it, wait for a response, and then it tells them stuff's wrong.
Yeah.
We check it on the front end just so we could give instant feedback, but we have to make sure before we save anything to our database that it's correct.
Okay.
How would a person be able to get around the front end regex validation?
Postman.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because you can use it, make an API request with Postman and send any data you want.
Yeah, I didn't think about that at all.
That's the easiest way.
Okay.
And I'm sure people are clever enough to figure out other ways of getting around it and the forms and stuff too.
Sure.
If there's a way, people figure it out. The good thing is none of us have a site that has enough traffic to really have to worry about it. But
Yeah, besides like Amazon and things like
oh, dude, yeah, that shit has to be on triple lockdown.
Yeah, it's probably attacked on the regular.
Oh, dude, it's probably being attacked by hundreds of people as we sit here and speak.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Around the clock, man. Because like every site on the internet will get like bot attacks constantly and stuff. Like if you looked at your AWS server logs, like you've probably had attacks.
Yeah.
But they're probably just like bot attacks and stuff like that. Just looking for
Did you say bot attack?
bot. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So bots just like constantly like.
Yeah, just trying to exploit like widely known exploits that are easy to get into. So people like send these bots out to, just ping every web address they can. And then if they find a vulnerability, I'm sure it like emails them or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a hacker. I don't know, but
Seem to know a little bit about this.
just a little bit. All right. So we essentially then repeat for last name and all the other stuff. So if not last name, errors.push. Screw this, I'm just copying this.
Yeah, I was like, you want to type it?
And then we'll just change this to last name, and finally last name. I'm going to delete this console log. That's going to throw an error. All right, and then same song and dance for email and password. Those are going to be not a lot different, but enough different that I'll just type it out. If not email, errors.push. I guess it's not going to be that different. Missing email address. Else if not validation dot email and pass an email. There's that push invalid email address given. All right, and then finally, if not password, errors dot push missing password. Else if not validation dot password errors dot push, and for that one we'll say invalid password must contain upper and lower case letters, numbers, special characters, and lowercase letters, numbers, special characters, and be at least 8 characters long. Alright.
We don't check for confirmed password?
No,
No.
there's really no point. I mean, if you wanted to just, I don't know. I can't think of a strong argument not to do it, and I can't think of a strong argument to do it though either. So
Not to do it. Save time.
exactly, that's the strongest argument right there. All right, so if we make it to here, if we make it to line 33 in the code, how would we know if we hit any errors or not? Yeah, so if the errors object has anything in it, then we'll know that there was errors. So we can say if errors dot length response dot status 22. We should return that. Sorry, return. Just because we want to exit right here, if it makes it here. Response dot status 422 dot send. And then we could do success. I don't even use the success anymore. I still put it in there though. Success false. And we'll say errors is equal to errors.
No. I'll just have to make that tomorrow.
Okay.
Wait a second. There's something. What was that called? Oh.
So we're there's two ways we could test this. We could test it using Postman, which is probably the correct way to test it. I'm going to show you my hacky way of testing it.
Let's go.
All right. So we could test it by submitting our form. So I'm going to clear my console. Okay. It should still work because there shouldn't be any errors in what we're doing right now. A what?
Post 500 internal server error.
Yeah, that means you hit an error somewhere in your code and it jumped down to the bottom. Just go to look at your terminal and see what the error message is. Oh yeah, that console log at the top. You gotta take that console log at the top out.
Oh.
Yeah. Since we destructured, it's no longer defined.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, so when you destructure, you can't use what you're destructuring like as a whole?
Nope. Unless you do this, you could do that. You could do body, comma, like that.
Okay.
But yeah, you have to do it separately. All right, so we know it works if it has valid data, but we want to test all of our errors. So I'm going to go through and kind of test these one at a time. So instead of if not first name, I'm going to say if first name. So I'm just going to make sure that it catches an error and it sends me back an error. So now if I submit my form, I do indeed get that 422. And if you go to network and find the red one, you should see success false, errors, missing first name. So we know that that did indeed work.
What?
The network tab becomes your best friend when you're doing backend.
Where should that message be?
But I have two messages right there. You have one message. All right.
So if you go to network, the network tab, and then click on, you should see all your sign up requests you made and find the red one. Let me click on the red one and then click on response. To the right, there should be that little white window and there's like a response tab.
I have both answers, like missing first name and invalid email address given. So why? No, I have the same one. See? And then I have comma and I have this thing. So I did something wrong here.
Did you get it to work?
Well, you just have multiple errors going on.
Yeah.
You take out the exclamation point here, right?
It's because email you're trying to validate with .name instead of .email. So that was failing.
Oh, thanks.
Good.
Was good, man?
That's good.
Was it crazy?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, it works.
Oh, yeah.
So
Just submit it again. There you go.
So you gamble?
Yeah.
What do you win?
that one's gone. This one's
Wait, so what are you changing on here to make it an error?
we've taken
Take
the
the exclamation.
Oh,
Yeah.
actually, first name.
we've taken the ban.
It runs automatically gonna be an error.
Yeah, it does.
So we're gonna go H1, like take ban off. Submit.
You can if you want to. I'm not going to. I'm going to trust that this works.
Ah, that's
Pretty wild.
the first time you say like trust.
Yeah. Well, just because we're running out of time. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
The main thing I really wanted to test here, Sasha, was that if there is an error, that this catches properly. Was the main thing I was really concerned about right now.
Yeah, and I see when I have different error, it's actually catch that one.
Yeah, it actually catches the different error. Yeah, if you test a couple of them and
And access true message. This is a sign in endpoint.
I didn't expect the first time I saw this.
Cool.
Yeah, in Vegas, on the strip.
What? Okay.
all right, so everyone good? Everyone do a little bit of testing, make sure your errors are catching and everything. So what that means now is if our code makes it to down here, line 40, that means that we have all the data that we should have. And the code should not be able to make it to here unless we have those 4 main pieces of information: first name, last name, email, and password. All right, everybody with me on that logic?
Yeah, but you still want us to test the rest of them, right?
No, you don't have to test the rest of them. Normally, if you're doing this in a real environment, I would definitely I would actually recommend using like Postman and try sending invalid data for each one and make sure testing it without having to change the code. Because changing the code to test it is a really bad way to do it.
Well, thank you for teaching us.
You're welcome. Thank you for teaching you a shortcut that you should never use.
I'm just going to tell my professor to copy it.
Yeah. That's what always scares me about like anything that I know is a little iffy to teach you guys. I'm like, I know they're gonna someday someone's gonna be like, why are you doing it that way?
Sure.
Oh, eventually.
Eventually.
Good. LearningFuze taught me to do it that way.
It's on the response. It says reference error
Reference error?
in the network tab.
No, it should not be a reference error.
So I click on the red sign up and then response, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it says buddy's not defined.
Oop, the other console.
Wow. Okay, so for the 12th time, up at the top of the sign up controller, we have that console log that we have to take out because we deconstructed body, so body is no longer defined. Okay, so at this point, when we make it to here, like I said, we have all of our data. So now we want to save stuff. Well, there's still a couple more steps, but at this point, we need to interact with the database. We need to check to see if someone with this email address has already signed up, and if that email address doesn't already exist in the database, then create a new user in the database. So can't go any further without doing database stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up Sequelize. And I think we npm installed it already. Yeah, we did. All right, so we're going to
I don't see under mine the dependency installed.
Are you looking at the right package.json file?
That's a good question.
Should be in the package.json.
On the very bottom one.
Yeah, do you see React in the dependencies?
What was that?
Do you see React in your
I did,
dependencies?
yeah, no, I
That's
see
the
that
wrong
one
one.
now.
Okay, and you have Sequelize?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so what we need now is we're going to need some configuration stuff. So collapsing all the folders. I suggest you do the same. I don't do it just for my health. And the very root directory, we're going to create a new folder called config. And in config, we're going to create a new file called db.js. And we will do module.exports equals an object. It just occurred to me, I think I understand how that works. Huh. All right, then we need, let's see, we need the hosts. which will be local host. We need the username, which we're just gonna start MAMP. Everybody has MAMP, right? Okay, so we're just gonna use MAMP. By default, that should be root, and the password should be root. And then lastly, we'll need our database name, database. And we haven't created our database yet, but I figure we could call it _shop. Seems legit. If your MAMP is running on different than 3306 for your MySQL, then you need to add port in here. But if that's the case, I would recommend just changing your MySQL server port to 3306. We'll talk about how to do that in a second and how to check for that. But if for some reason you can't run your MySQL on port 3306, then you could change the port number here. All right, and then we will create in our config, we'll create an index file. We'll say index.js. And we'll do module.exports equals dbconfig require this directory db.js. And then we'll go to db.js, copy everything from here, create yet another file, and we'll call it db.template. If your code editor asks you about something with the template files, I just ignore all that. And then in db.template, we're just going to delete all the actual information that matters. So we have a nice template. So when we put this on a real server, then we could just copy this file. When we copy it, name it db.js, and then just fill it out with the proper information. Should be good to go.
Do we need to get ignore db.js?
That's what we're going to do next. Yeah. And then what we're going to do to make sure we don't commit our db.js or any other config file, we're going to go to our gitignore. Make sure it's the gitignore in the root directory. If it's not the root directory, it will not work. All right. So we're going to say we want to ignore config. Config /star.js. So all JavaScript files inside of the config folder we want to ignore. However, we don't want to ignore config /index.js.
Because we plan on adding more JavaScript files in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll probably won't get to it today because we only have 2 minutes left. But yeah, there'll definitely be more files in here.
Okay.
Yep. VS Code doesn't understand the knots in your gitignores, but that should work. Everybody good? All right. So now, once again, in the root directory, we're going to make another new folder. And we're going to call this one DB. And inside of DB, we'll make our beloved index.js. And at the top, we'll do sequelize, sequelize equals require sequelize. We'll pull in all of our require packet directory config, and then we can just chain onto this dot dd config, and then we can pull off all of our config information like host, username, password, and database.
Scott, did you put anything in the index.js in the config folder?
Yeah.
May I see it? Thank you.
Anything for you, Sri?
Oh, I feel special.
That was just such a soft movie.
All right, then we are going to.
Nothing else up there?
That's it.
Uh-huh. That's it.
That's all we've done. Actually, before we go any further, because one more step and we'll connect to the database, let's quickly create our database. All we need to do is just create the database. Sequelize will actually create all the tables and shit for us. So
Mine is giving me the airphone. Yep.
So what we need to do is open MAMP and start your servers. Doesn't matter what folder and stuff it's pointing to. None of that matters because we're just connecting to the SQL database. But what I do want everybody to do is double check what port, or actually here, let's just go to the web page and double check what port if you scroll down a little bit, you should see all your MySQL settings and make sure you're on port 3306.
Yeah, I'm on port 8889.
Okay. So if you're on I don't know why they started doing that. They used to default to the proper one, but recent versions don't. If you're on a Mac, go back to MAMP and click spacebar comma, or not spacebar, sorry, command comma. If you're on Windows, there should just be a big button there that says settings. And then we're going to go to the ports tab. And then you're going to change your MySQL port to 3306. Click OK.
You can leave the other ones the way they are?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Those don't, for this, they don't matter.
Gotcha.
We're just using the SQL server. So once you've changed it to 3306, OK, your SQL server will probably restart. the dot will go, ungreen and then back to green. And then once it's done doing that, you should be able to refresh your page over here, and then it should say port 3306.
Perfect.
Yay. Anybody have any trouble with that? Like I said, you can configure SQLize to use a different port. Because, you could connect to any server on any port. Just by default, MySQL is 3306. So if you run it on that port, everything works without having to tell what port to connect to on. As the default for MySQL is 3306. Anyways, now we're going to click on phpMyAdmin.
You said click on pt-8.
Yeah, on the map page, there's a link to phpMyAdmin
Okay.
right in the MySQL section.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And then we're going to click on the left side, we're going to click on new to create a new database. And then for the database name, we're going to say I_shop. Actually, turned out to be kind of a clever name. iShop. And then you want to do for the collation crap, UTF_general_CI. By default, it's probably set to that, but if not, set it to that.
Not to deviate too much. What does that mean?
It has to do with the way it stores the data and like what character sets it uses and stuff.
Okay.
UTF-8. Yeah, if that didn't come up by default, make sure you select it.
I have F16, F32. Where do I find UTF?
Yeah.
Where can I find UTF-8?
Scroll down till you hit UTF-8. There's like a whole section for it.
I have 16. Oh, yeah, okay. And then UTF-8 what?
General CI.
General CI?
Yep.
General CI.
All right, all good?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to click create. Okay, so that should create the database. Once again, we don't have any tables. We're going to let SQLize handle creating the tables because it's cool like that and it'll do it for us. Once we define what we want the tables to look like. So now we'll go back to our code. So we're still in our index.js inside of our DB folder. And we should be able to write the code, and then it should connect to the database if all went well. So we're say const SQLize equals new SQLize. And then we got to pass it our database name, our username, That's interesting. Well, see how this turns out. Oh, yeah, there it goes. Okay. And then we're going to pass it some options. We're going to set host to host. And then we're going to do dialect. And that will be MySQL. And we're going to turn logging to false because it's really annoying when it's on because it console logs every single query it makes. And it's really hard to see any of your other console logs. And we're going to do operators aliases to false. This is a security thing. And then pool configuration. And this is configuring how it pulls the requests. And this is just the default settings they tell you to set it to. So I don't even know what all this means. I just know this is how they tell you to set it up initially until you know more about it. And I don't know more about it, so we're just going to stick with their recommendations.
I still have a question about it.
What's that? Oh, ACQU acquire. There we go. And we want that to be 30,000. So 30 seconds.
What is the dialect? Is it just saying what our database is or what we're using?
Yeah, because there's like Postgres and SQLite and stuff. So there's different types of SQL databases. So you have to tell what type of SQL database are you using. Huh? MySQL2 is no, that's the thing. That's actually working with the database. This uses that library to work with. We're not going to ever directly use MySQL2. SQLite uses it. And then idle 10 seconds. It looks like 10, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And once again, like these settings are the pool settings. I know what the rest of these are doing, but the pool settings, I haven't taken the time to read into all the pooling stuff you could do with it. So it's just set to what they tell you to set it to. Because there's like a freaking whole book worth of information on what the pooling crap is. I mean, I know generally what pooling is, but yeah. All right, then we're going to say, someone say something?
No, I just said, oh.
Okay. And we're going to say SQLize.authenticate. This returns a promise, but because we're not within a function, we can't use async await, so we just have to say .then. We could write a little function, but that would be just a little bit of no point. And then all we're going to do in this callback is we're just going to say console.log connected to MySQL DB. And then we'll add a .catch. That'll get an error in its callback. And I'm going to say error connecting to MySQL DB. And then we're almost to the end, and we can test it, and then we'll be going to lunch.
We're not on a audit.
I'm starving, and I need nicotine.
There's many things working against the continuation of this process.
Yes. And then we're going to say module.exports equals SQLize. And then to get this to work, to actually call it, And I'm out of Diet Coke. Man, it's getting rough. It's getting rough over here, guys. Type faster.
Time to go,
No more questions.
One question.
No more witty questions.
Keep going, keep going.
None questions.
All right, so the one other thing we got to do to actually test this is we're going to go to our main index server file. So index.js, our very main server. And somewhere up here, we're going to say require this directory db. And then in your server, you should see connected to MySQL DB. That means it worked. If you got an error that it couldn't connect, then it did not work.
It's true.
Huh?
So you have to like that's the thing. It's all actually working.
What's up? I lost you in translation.
It's just that console log in here.
Yeah.
But it's actually connected for real.
Yeah. Yeah. If you see that console log, it's connected to the database. Like magic.
Yeah, I have to watch this again.
No, I got Eric.
Capitalize SQL and make it
Of course you did, Shri. Of course you did. All right. That's it for the video, though.